My parents sold my life to save my brother. The same Tommy who never stops sinking into that boot still thinks he's the king of the world. Every time I thought I had already drowned in this mess, they pushed me even deeper, begging me to help him. But you know what? This time things didn't go according to their script. And trust me, it's only going to get worse from here. My name is Mark, I'm 22, and to be honest, my family is, to put it mildly, chaos. Not the cute kind of chaos with family picnics and dinners together. More like some cheap thriller where at every turn, surprises are thrown at you that make you want to scream. My life has always revolved around taking care of the family. Or rather, taking care of my older brother, Tommy. He was the golden boy my parents adored from birth. As for me, I was always in the shadows, like my role was just to be the extra in his never-ending show called Tommy's Life. When it came to college, my parents decided that Tommy needed it more than I did, because, of course, he was destined for greatness. And me, I was expected to roll up my sleeves and work for the greater good. So, I found myself as a puppet, working several jobs while Tommy partied at lavish events, throwing money around. Everything seemed to be rolling along the same old path. I slaved away, he lived it up. But one day, things changed. One evening turned my understanding of family upside down and showed me how deep they were willing to drag me into their mess. If you ever thought life couldn't get worse, let me tell you a secret. It can. Like a crazed robot, I bounced between jobs. At night, I worked as a loader. During the day, I cleaned up after others, and on weekends, of course, I picked up more shifts, just to scrape together some cash for myself. But I never had money, nor time for life. Everything went to Tommy. He never once said thank you for the fact that I was practically funding his education. And my parents kept feeding me the same lean. Mark, it's for the family, you have to understand. What understanding were they expecting from me? I couldn't even eat properly. The only thing I could afford was the cheapest fast food that made you feel even worse. And Tommy? He ordered food deliveries straight to campus, of course, with my money. One evening, when I came home after another sleepless night, I overheard my parents discussing something in the living room. At first, I wasn't going to get involved, but their voices grew louder. I stopped in the hallway and listened. My mom was crying. Crying because Tommy had messed up again. Yeah, you heard right. Tommy was in trouble again. But this time, it was worse than usual. He lost all the money we sent for his tuition, my mom whispered, barely holding back tears. Dad was trying to comfort her, but I could tell he was in shock himself. Somehow, Tommy had gotten himself into debt. He took all the money meant for his education and gambled it on some risky deals. And now, it was all gone. Not just gone, but disappeared. Like my hopes that this guy would ever learn to grow up. I stood there like an idiot, realizing that everything I had worked for had gone down the drain. I slaved away to pay for his endless partying, and he just blew it all in one go. The blow was so hard it became difficult to breathe. My life was slowly but surely spiraling into absolute madness, all because of one person who didn't care about me. Dad, as usual, decided to play the wise man. He stood in front of Mom and said something like, "He's just stumbling on his path. You know, like all great people. Tommy's just going through a tough time. He'll pull through." What? This guy seriously believes Tommy is some kind of genius who just made a temporary mistake? Stumbling? He's not just stumbling. He's rolling down a hill, and while everyone's waiting for him to stop, he's only picking up speed. I stood behind the door, barely restraining myself from barging into the room and saying everything I thought. But you know, sometimes it's better to breathe out first, then explode. Inside, everything was boiling as if I was on the verge of blowing up. The next day, I was already on edge, but there comes Tommy, acting like nothing happened. He walks in, dressed in his ridiculous designer clothes, looking like he just came from a photo shoot for some brand. I was ready to snap. I hated him at that moment. And here he is, strolling down the hallway, all relaxed, with that stupid grin on his face. Oh, trust me, that was the final straw. "Do you even know that I'm sacrificing everything for you?" I shouted so loud that even the neighbors probably heard. My face was burning with rage. I didn't know what to expect, but certainly not what happened next. Tommy stopped, slowly turned to me, and his eyes. They looked at me like I was just some annoying background noise in his perfect life. And what did he do? He smiled, as if I had just told him a joke. "Chill out, bro. I'll fix everything," he said. Calmly, like we were talking about something trivial, like him forgetting to pick up milk from the store. Not about how he had flushed all my efforts down the drain. That dumb smile, those empty words, that's all it took for me to understand one crucial thing. There was never going to be a fix everything. Ever. Tommy was a hopeless void. He was just riding the wave of his mistakes, and I was the fool rowing for him. After that blow-up with Tommy, I realized, this is a pointless cycle where I will always be in the background, and he will be the eternal king of disasters. You know, there are moments when you realize it's time to save yourself, not him. And like a true strategist, I gathered the last bits of my savings. Of course, there wasn't much, years of slaving away for Tommy while being broke myself, but it was enough to start planning my escape from this circus. Meanwhile, Tommy continued his great financial downfall. My parents, as always, refused to see him as a problem. Oh, to them, Tommy was always a loser with potential. You know, the kind of guy who's just about to become successful, but is always stuck in failure. They kept saying, he's just still finding himself. Yeah, he's searching so deeply that he seems to have lost himself forever. And me? I just couldn't watch it anymore. But there's the funniest part. When you think things can't get worse, life always says, "Hold my beer, watch this." One evening, my mom called. Completely panicked. Yeah, I could already sense it had something to do with Tommy, because in our house, panic calls never meant anything good. "Mark," she started, barely holding back tears. "Tommy's in debt. They're threatening him. If you don't help, we'll lose him." Oh, wonderful. Creditors. Like I didn't have enough problems with his stupid decisions, now we had creditors with baseball bats. And my mom? She was hysterical, as if Tommy were some poor lamb who needed immediate rescue. She was literally pulling at my heartstrings. "Mark, you have to help him. If you don't, we'll lose him." And you know what? Something inside me snapped. Before, I would have rushed to help. Because, well, family, right? But now, I was at my limit. In that moment, I just realized, all this time, I hadn't been saving my brother. I had been saving his constant screw-ups. He didn't learn, he didn't change. Everything I did was sucked into the black hole of his failures. So when she begged me to help, I probably told her the truth for the first time in my life. "That's not my problem," I said coldly. I heard her voice shaking on the other end of the line, but I didn't care. Let him deal with his own mess. And that was the moment I had always feared, but knew would come eventually. My parents turned to me as their last hope. No, they didn't just ask. They literally begged me to help Tommy, because you're his brother, how can you leave him? "Oh, thanks for the crappy reminder, Mom." Like I forgot that I've spent my whole life being his free rescue service. They were so desperate, they even suggested selling my car. My car? Well, of course, why not? After all, Tommy is more important than anything, including my damn life. "You have to take out a loan, borrow money from someone. Mark, if you don't help, they'll tear him apart." Dad shouted, waving his hands like that would make it more convincing. Yeah, I really wanted to take out a loan so my brother could keep living the high life, ignoring all the problems. Honestly, I'd never seen them like this. They were ready to do anything to save Tommy, and for a moment, it made me think, maybe I should sell the car and forget about it. But then that disgusting image of Tommy sitting on his lazy ass, with that stupid smirk, popped into my head. I stood there in front of them, my insides boiling, my head ready to explode from the pressure. My life had become some stupid puzzle. Either be the savior again for someone who isn't even trying to change, or finally tell it all to hell and let him sink in his own problems. My parents were pushing the guilt button, as always. "Mark, you know he can't make it without you." Yeah, sure, he can't. When has he ever managed anything on his own? And then I realized one simple thing. If I caved again to this situation, nothing would change. Tommy would keep ruining his life, and I'd keep ruining mine, trying to save him. It's like an endless loop. And you know what? I was done being the victim. I wasn't going to make a fool of myself again for his fake redemption. So, just like in a cheap TV show, Tommy decided to play the I'm changing card. First, through friends and acquaintances. You know how it goes when you've been told to go to hell but still try to find loopholes. His grand plan was to spread the rumor that he had changed and just needed a little time. What an original approach. Honestly, Tommy, your imagination is about as sharp as a potato. Then came his desperate attempt to reach out to me directly. He begged to meet just for a minute. Sounded like, I'm ready to suck the last bit of life out of you. Fine, I agreed to meet. Because, sometimes it's interesting to see how far people will go in their desperation before they finally realize that they're a complete failure. We met at some rundown cafe that had clearly seen better days. One of those places where the waiter looks like they're about to cry if you ask for extra ice. Tommy was sitting at the table, and I immediately knew this was going to be a one-man puppet show. He looked like he had just binge-watched an entire season of some dumb reality show where the hero pulls through at the last moment. His face was a little pale, but he still had that same trick with sad eyes and a pleading voice. The guy clearly thought I'd fall for it. He practically got down on his knees, begging, Mark, bro, give me one last chance. I'll fix everything. I swear, I'll pay it all back. Yeah, sure. Like all his debts will magically disappear in one day, and he'll start a new life. It was laughable. And no matter how hard he tried to look desperate, I didn't see an ounce of sincerity in his eyes. You know what I did see? Just another attempt to wriggle out of his mess. I looked at him and thought, who even are you? Do you really think this will work? You think I'm that naive? He kept repeating the same thing. I'll fix it. I promise. I'll pay back all the money. God, like I hadn't heard that a million times. His face, the same smirk as always, but now with the added touch of a pitiful attempt to make me feel sorry for him. Nope, Tommy, not this time. I stood up, looked him straight in the eyes, and said without any extra words, you dug this hole yourself, no dig yourself out. And trust me, not a single muscle in my face twitched. Rumors that I had finally told Tommy to go to hell spread through the family like wildfire. Of course, it wasn't long before my parents started trashing me. Their favorite phrase was, how could you abandon your brother in his time of need? Oh, come on, guys. Abandon him? I never even lifted him up to abandon him. He had always been like an anchor I had been dragging behind me. And now, for the first time in my life, I decided that I'd had enough of playing the rescuer, and boom, I became the villain of the century. My mom cried and sobbed into the phone. You just don't understand. Tommy is your brother. You can't leave him in this state. Yes, Mom, I understand that he's my brother, and that's nature's biggest mistake. But I didn't say that to her. I just sighed and quietly hung up the phone. Discussion over. Dad wasn't much better. He just grumbled something about how I would regret this decision, like I was signing my own death warrant. Well, maybe I am, but at least I'll enjoy finally living for myself, not for Tommy. Both of them refused to face reality. They just didn't want to admit that their golden boy was a loser who would never change. Meanwhile, I started to pull myself out. For the first time in a long time, I started working for myself. I enrolled in evening classes at college, and though studying washad and balancing work and classes washel, I finally started feeling like my life had some meaning. It was like stepping out of a dark tunnel into the light. Well, at least a dim lamp. Yeah, life was far from perfect. I was still working multiple jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, and eating cheap instant noodles. But you know what? This time, I was working for myself. It was my struggle, and that was the best part. I no longer had to pull Tommy out of his latest mess. And honestly, that was the best feeling in the world. I knew Tommy would never change. He was programmed that way. Every time someone saved him, it only reinforced his sense of invincibility. And if you keep handing him a life preserver, why would he ever learn to swim? But that life preserver was no longer coming from me. If he drowns, that's his choice. As expected, Tommy continued to sink deeper into debt, like a man who tied cement boots to himself. All his grand promises to fix things turned out to be a Semtiash's bank account. I heard from mutual acquaintances that he's now banned from several bars because of his debts, and creditors are starting to seriously come after him. My parents tried to save him at first, maybe even sold some furniture. But sooner or later, they realized that the only person who could pull Tommy out of this hole was Tommy himself. Spoiler, he never will. And me? I finally broke free of this family nightmare. Imagine that. I'm finally living for myself. No more endless night shifts to save my brother. No more feeling like I owe the world. Now, everything I do is for me. I'm no longer playing these stupid family games where I'm the hero, and Tommy is the poor victim. Everyone has to help. I moved to another city, enrolled in college full-time, and you know what? I'm enjoying life. Yeah, I still have a ton of work and a pile of student debt, but those are my problems, and I'm solving them myself, without someone else's debts hanging over my head. It's a completely different feeling when every step you take leads to something real, not another pitfall. It's like surfacing after a long dive. The air is genuinely fresh. Sometimes lying in bed at night, I ask myself, what would have happened if I had tried to save Tommy again? Would things have been different this time? But as soon as that thought crosses my mind, I remember all the times I pulled him up, and how every time he dragged me back down. Every time I saved him, I was drowning myself. He always found a way to end up in the same mess, and I always ended up being his savior again. But that cycle is over, and I'm glad I broke it. Tommy will always be Tommy, but now that's his problem, not mine.